Our last speaker for this session is Mr. Ashan Wickramasinghe. He will be speaking on Islamic State and the Demise of Westphalia, a new look at sovereignty in the Middle East. Mr. Wickramasinghe is Masters from the University of Sheffield in the UK and is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Colombo in International Relations. He works for the corporate sector in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take the discussion away from Sri Lanka a bit, talking about sovereignty. We've heard about sovereignty a lot today. So I'm going to start off by asking, does the concept of sovereignty mean anything today? State-centric theories which dominate international relations are built on the assumption that states are by definition sovereign. The attacks on the state-centric paradigm implies that state sovereignty is being eroded by economic interdependence, global-scale technologies, and democratic politics. Modern technology empowers non-state or sub-state actors to evade state efforts to control the flow of goods, people, money, and information across territorial boundaries. The flow of capital, especially to another state or another currency, takes place often to escape state fiscal and monetary policies. Sovereignty is not about state control, but about state authority. The question is whether or not the state's ability to make authoritative political decisions has eroded. That is, whether the ultimate political authority has shifted from the state to non-state actors or institutions. To give a bit of context, in 1618 in Prague, religious tensions within the Holy Roman Empire reached a breaking point as a group of Protestants tried 3 Catholics for violating Protestant rights to religious freedom, found them guilty and threw them out of a window. This action, in an extremely simplistic sense, plunged Europe into a destructive war that lasted 30 years. The treaties of Osnabrück and Munster ended the war in 1648 and changed the way nations interacted with each other. It is traditionally regarded that the Peace of Westphalia created a new wave of nationalism in Europe and redefined what it means to be an independent nation. Westphalian sovereignty has 3 phases. Firstly, Westphalia made the sovereign state the most powerful and legitimate form of political unity. Secondly, it found a government with control over its territory to be the criteria for statehood. And thirdly, Westphalia removed previously legitimate restrictions on a state's activities within its territory. The latter provision is especially important. To be a sovereign nation, authority cannot come from outside the state. The first Muslim state to be incorporated into this new international system was the Ottoman state in the mid-19th century, owing to a central policy of the Sultan, who needed to appease external interests and execute a process of modernization. This adoption of an outlandish concept for parochial reasons by the Ottoman Sultan created a delicate situation, requiring a balancing act of the autonomy of Islam and external pressure for modernism. Across a vast region, Islam was traditionally the unifying force, creating a civilization that shared common principles such as philosophy, the arts, a vision of a moral life, a sense of justice, jurisprudence, and good governance. The main elements in the Islamic political organization are threefold: the Sharia, the right code of conduct derived from the Holy Quran and the Sunnah; the Caliph as the deputy of the Prophet, the upholder and executor of the Sharia, and therefore the chief source of legitimacy; and the Ummah, the community of the faithful, the object of the Sharia enforcement which must be kept united so that the enforcement of the Sharia be made meaningful. The profound influence of religion upon international affairs is very vivid these days on every platform of media. From the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to Al-Qaeda cells in Europe and elsewhere, to the influence of evangelical Christianity on US politics. Currently, the Islamic State is dominating the political landscape in the Middle East and the future stability of the region through their use of radical interpretation of Islam to justify methods of violence. This group acts upon transnational religious ideals, recruits cadre from across state borders, and claims sovereignty over territory whose boundaries are defined by faith. Islamic State has many of the attributes of a conventional state. It is effectively governing 8 million Syrians and Iraqis. It is headed by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who has assumed the title of Caliph. Beneath him, al-Baghdadi has a chief advisor on Syria and a chief advisor on Iraq, each of whom lead 5 to 7 governors and several councils. To call ISIS an insurgency gives too little attention to its ambition for territorial control. To call it a state gives it a false air of legitimacy. But it falls somewhere between the two. ISIS is an unusual state because it does not believe in state sovereignty. Its ideology puts it fundamentally at odds with the norms of Westphalian sovereignty that have developed in the industrial system over the past 3 centuries. The Islamic State poses an interesting vision of the sovereign state that is both Westphalian and pre-Westphalian in nature. It demands recognition as a sovereign state while it seeks to create a new world order in which territorial lines are based on religious identity. Its goal of erasing political borders is particularly interesting as it considers the border as being offensive to Islam, owing to the fact that it was created as part of the Sykes-Picot Agreement between Britain and France that carved up the Ottoman Empire in the waning days of World War I. ISIS is able to mobilize a community of people bound by religious values that exists beyond the territorial boundaries of states, and in so doing presents a substantive, non-traditional actor in a world dominated by nation-states as the primary actors. By mobilizing an international community based on religious principles to challenge the domestic politics of states, transnational religious movements challenge traditional conceptions of state sovereignty. A map circulating on the internet purports to depict ISIS's vision of its caliphate. While the provenance of this map is in doubt, it is consistent with statements made by the leadership of ISIS about the way they see the legitimate territory that ISIS should hold. Perhaps beyond the borders depicted in the map, there might be some notion that other states have some form of sovereignty. But any sovereignty that infringes on lands perceived to be historically Muslim would be illegitimate. ISIS might recognize sovereignty outside of these borders for precisely the reason that it does not recognize sovereignty within them. Although ISIS rejects sovereignty on the basis of religious ideas, this does not imply that Islam is inconsistent with sovereignty. A closer look at ISIS's interpretation would indicate a version of Islam which rejects sovereignty, while other interpretations may or may not. The extremely influential teachings of Islamist intellectual Said Qutb justifies the notion of jihad in his book The Milestones, precisely because humans have embraced earthly rather than heavenly sovereignty. This idea is Qutb's central argument in the main chapter on jihad, and Qutb explicitly states that sovereignty of God requires eliminating sovereignty by humans. In conclusion, there are many groups around the globe that are unhappy with state borders as they currently exist. It is tempting to view ISIS as another of these groups. However, there is a fundamental difference. Many groups make their territorial claims on the basis of existing norms of sovereignty, asserting that current borders are illegitimate because they violate the right of a people to collective self-determination. Such groups are challenging existing borders but not underlying norms of sovereignty. In contrast, ISIS is not just dissatisfied with the current borders but rejects the possibility of borders altogether. ISIS is likely to be exceedingly expansionist for some time to come. This makes it difficult or probably impossible for other states to bargain with them, because maximally expansionist goals effectively eliminate the range of possible bargains. Add to this the idea that ISIS is doctrinally committed to the illegitimacy of all such agreements, and it becomes unlikely that normal international relations could ever occur. It could be argued that ISIS will start to believe in sovereignty once the group consolidates territory and starts governing. The argument persists that pragmatic governance issues could lead ISIS to moderate its radical rejection of the legitimacy of industrial borders and industrial system. However, this remains to be seen. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Mr. Wickramasinghe.